I submitted my incident report at 0600 the morning after the Mess Hall 3 event. Chief Warden Saul had already filed his. His ran to 9 pages. Mine was 4 paragraphs. I have been asked, through 2 intermediaries and 1 highly uncomfortable direct conversation, to expand mine. This is that expansion. I will be precise. I will note at the outset that I am not a beast handler. My credentials are field doctrine and garrison logistics. I have been stationed at Cray 9 for 11 months, and in that time, my most complex interaction with the Vakkari wing was signing the intake paperwork for 6 juveniles in Cycle 3. I have never received surge response training. I was not on the duty roster for the acquisition rotation. I was off shift the evening in question, and I was walking to Mess Hall 3 for a field ration pack, Model 6. The ones with the pressed grain blocks. I prefer them over the Model 8s. That is the full extent of my preparation for what followed. Chief Warden Saul's report describes a Category Red combat emergency, a garrison-wide threat response, and his words, a rapid and decisive neutralization of the surge event through coordinated handler action. I read this 3 times. I believe the Chief Warden is sincere. I also believe he was observing from the other side of a sealed blast door, and events look considerably different from there. Here is what I observed from inside the room. Rusk, that is the name he has held since intake. Command prefers Subject V7, but the handlers call him Rusk, and I am using that. Rusk was in full surge when I pushed through the galley door. I did not know this. My personal comm unit had been cycling through a maintenance restart for the previous 40 minutes, and the evacuation tone had not reached me. I walked in expecting a quiet room and found something else entirely. A Vakkari in surge is not subtle. At rest, Rusk's body plan is roughly comparable to a large bear from the old biological catalogs, 4-limbed, heavy across the shoulders, a dense outer coat that runs iron gray at the tips and brown gold at the root. In surge, the musculature across his haunches and neck roughly doubles, and his head, which is already proportionally large, lowers and shifts forward in a way that 3 garrison staff have cited in formal reassignment requests over the past month. The eyes shift through amber to gold to a pale white at peak. There is a subharmonic vocalization, a pulse that sits just below the threshold of conscious hearing for most species, that resonates in the chest wall and produces in most observers a strong and sensible instinct to be somewhere else. I have since read the field literature on all of this. It is documented in considerable detail. I was not aware of any of it at the time. I noticed the lights seemed warm and strange. I noticed a pressure in my chest that I attributed to the ventilation system. I sat down at my usual bench, second from the left near the heating unit, and I opened my ration pack. I want to be precise about what follows, because Chief Warden Saul's report implies a trained intervention, and the record must be accurate. I did not approach the beast. I did not call to it, gesture at it, or make any deliberate overture. I sat down because my feet were tired, and I opened my ration pack because I was hungry, and I was not looking at Rusk because I had not yet understood that Rusk was the source of the pressure in my chest or the amber light moving in the corner of my vision. He registered me. Somewhere between my first and second grain block, the subharmonic changed. It did not stop, it descended. The difference between a struck bell and a palm laid flat against it to damp the sound. The pressure in my sternum became something warmer, almost a comfort. I thought oddly of the furnace room in the garrison's lower east block on a cold morning. I looked up. Rusk was crossing the mess hall floor toward me, not charging, walking. His head was below the shoulder line. The field literature I later read calls this a de-escalation posture, the animal reducing its own profile, communicating something it has no words for. He stopped 3 feet from my bench and looked at me with eyes that were still amber at the edges but going brown toward the center. I held out a piece of the grain block. I cannot account for this decision with great precision. I was not thinking about surge protocols because I did not know surge protocols existed. I was thinking that the creature in front of me was the largest living thing I had been within arm's reach of in 11 years of garrison service, and that it was not moving like something that intended harm, and that my instinct, the one that kept me functional through 11 postings and one deeply unwise situation near the Keth border, was telling me to hold still, keep my hand level, and do not flinch. Rusk ate the grain block from my palm. His mouth was large enough to take my hand past the wrist. He chose not to. He lay down. I placed my hand on the back of his neck. The fur there is dense and warm, warmer than I expected, like placing your palm against a sun-heated stone. I did not grip. I did not press. I maintained contact and kept my breathing steady because the alternative seemed inadvisable. The amber left his eyes, the subharmonic resolved. His breathing slowed to something I could count. He was asleep within 4 minutes. I finished my ration pack. I remained at the bench for a further 8 minutes because moving quickly seemed unwise, and also because my feet still ached, and the warmth coming off Rusk's coat was not unpleasant in a room that runs cold at that hour. Chief Warden Saul's handlers came through the galley door shortly after. They were in full surge response armor with containment lances at ready, and they found me eating the last of my grain blocks while 1,000 pounds of apex predator slept across my boots. I do not fault them for the looks they exchanged. I would have had the same look. Now, the chief warden contends that the above constitutes a specialized intervention requiring formal documentation as a combat-adjacent event, and that any attempt to replicate the sequence must be preceded by surge handling certification, a behavioral risk assessment, and approval from the Vakkari Acquisition Committee. I understand his concerns. I do not share them. The following morning, Rusk entered a second surge at 0915 in the loading corridor adjacent to the Vakkari wing. Chief Warden Saul was present with 4 senior handlers. The event was assessed at Category Amber within 90 seconds. The handlers moved to response positions. I was passing through the corridor with paperwork for the wing supervisor. I sat down on the nearest equipment crate. I opened the ration bar I had been carrying in my kit pocket since the previous evening. I held out a piece. The amber went to brown in 30 seconds. Rusk lay down across the corridor floor with his chin on my knee, and 4 senior handlers stood with containment lances at port arms and said nothing, and Chief Warden Saul said nothing, and Handler Das, who has been on Vakkari duty for 6 years, and who I believe has strong opinions about the current protocol manual, looked from Rusk to the Chief Warden in a way I found instructive, and I finished my ration bar and delivered my paperwork and went back to my desk. I have since given the sequence a name. If I do not, Command will name it, and I prefer not to find out what they would choose. The sequence is 3 steps. First, sit down and do not approach. Place yourself in the animal's space without moving toward it. Let it place you. Second, offer food from your own stores. Not a directed throw, not a tool-delivered unit. Your hand, your food at rest. Let it come to you. Third, maintain contact, one hand steady, no gripping, until the surge vocalization resolves on its own. I am entering this into the field record as the standard winding procedure. It is not a trained technique. It is a description of what I did because I was hungry and my feet hurt, and my comm unit was down for maintenance. I am documenting it because it worked on both occasions, and I believe it will work again, and because the existing field literature on Vakkari surge response currently runs to 400 pages, and none of them suggests sitting down and extending a grain block. Perhaps they should have. Rusk is asleep under my desk as I write this final entry. He has occupied that position for 14 hours. Chief Warden Saul has requested, through an intermediary, that the animal be returned to the Vakkari wing. I have replied, also through an intermediary, that Rusk is not currently preventing anyone from moving him, and that no one has yet attempted to move him, and that I have added this observation to the record as Appendix D. I suggest the Chief Warden review Appendix D before filing any further requests. I consider this matter fully documented. Sergeant-Instructor Mael Thorne. Field Doctrine and Logistics. Garrison Cray 9.